Hey everyone, and a massive, warm welcome back to the channel. To every single person watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, I am sending you the biggest, most positive vibes. I truly hope you're feeling fantastic, happy, and most importantly, healthy today. Take a deep breath, relax, and get ready for a story that will completely change how you look at one of the most common foods in your kitchen. Now, picture this. You're in your garden or at the grocery store, and you see those beautiful, plump, red tomatoes. You might think about adding them to a salad, making a fresh pasta sauce, or just eating one like an apple. They're everywhere, right? A totally normal, harmless, and delicious part of our diet. But what if I told you that for nearly 200 years in Europe, people were absolutely terrified of these same fruits? I'm not talking about them being a little disliked. I'm talking about a widespread belief that they were deadly poisonous, a sinister fruit that could kill you in minutes. They were called poison apples and were grown solely as decorative plants by people who admired their beauty but would never, ever dream of eating them. It sounds like a bizarre fairy tale, but I promise you, this is a true and fascinating chapter in our history. The story of how the tomato went from a feared, poisonous decoration to the cornerstone of Italian cuisine and a global kitchen staple is a wild ride involving class warfare, faulty science, and one of the most dramatic public relations turnarounds in history. To understand this fear, we have to travel back in time to the 1500s. This was the age of exploration, when Spanish conquistadors were sailing to the New World, the Americas, and bringing back all sorts of exotic plants and animals that Europeans had never seen before. Among corn, potatoes, cocoa, and tobacco, they also brought back a curious vine with bright yellow flowers that produced small, lumpy, yellow-orange fruits. The Aztecs in Mesoamerica called it tomatal, and they had been cultivating and eating it for centuries. The Spanish introduced this new plant to Europe and their colonies around the world. Now, when the tomato first arrived in places like Spain and Italy, it was met with instant suspicion. And you have to understand, the European diet at the time was very, very conservative. People stuck to what they knew, grains like wheat and rye, vegetables like cabbages and onions, and meats. Anything new was treated with extreme caution. The tomato was a foreign invader, and its story was off to a very rocky start. The first reason for the fear was its family ties. Botanists at the time classified the tomato as a member of the Solanaceae family. Now, that's a fancy name, but you know this family well. It's the Nightshade family. And the Nightshade family had a very, very bad reputation in Europe. This family includes some of the most infamous and deadly poisonous plants in the world, like belladonna, also called deadly nightshade, mandrake, and henbane. These plants contain powerful tropane alkaloids that can cause hallucinations, paralysis, and death. So, when wealthy, upper-class Europeans, the ones who could afford to have elaborate gardens and study plants, saw that this new fruit was related to deadly nightshade, they immediately slapped a label on it. Danger. Poison. It was guilt by association. The tomato's leaves and stems do actually contain small amounts of these toxic compounds, which didn't help its case. People made a logical, but ultimately incorrect, leap. If the plant is related to poison and parts of the plant are poisonous, then the fruit must be poisonous too. But the story gets even more bizarre and specific. There's a famous, though likely exaggerated, tale that contributed greatly to the poison apple myth. The story goes that in the 1700s, a wealthy European aristocrat would eat a lavish meal with many foods on a pewter plate. Pewter is a metal alloy that often contained a high percentage of lead. After the meal, he would become terribly ill, sometimes even dying. The rich, acidic juice from the tomatoes on his plate would leach lead from the expensive pewter dinnerware. This lead would then get into the food, and the diner would subsequently suffer from lead poisoning. The symptoms of lead poisoning include severe stomach cramps, paralysis, and even brain damage. But because people didn't understand chemistry, they didn't blame the poisonous lead leaching from their fancy plates. They blamed the new, scary, acidic fruit that was on the plate. So, the tomato got the blame for making the upper class sick. Ironically, poor people who ate off of wooden plates didn't have this problem, which is part of why the fear was mostly a rich person's phobia for a long time. Because of this fear, the tomato was essentially banished from the dinner table of polite society for generations. So, what did people do with it? They grew it purely as an ornamental plant. They thought the vines were beautiful with their bright fruits, and they would plant them in gardens to admire their looks. It became a symbol of exotic beauty and was even considered an aphrodisiac in some circles, which only added to its mysterious and dangerous reputation. It was in the colonies, particularly in North America, that the tomato started its long road to redemption. People were more pragmatic and willing to experiment. Legend has it that a gentleman named Robert Gibbon Johnson decided to prove the tomato was safe in a wildly dramatic public stunt. The story goes that in 1820, in Salem, New Jersey, he stood on the steps of the courthouse and announced to a gathered crowd that he would eat an entire basket of tomatoes. The crowd was horrified, expecting him to drop dead on the spot. But he didn't. He ate one tomato after another and survived, proving they weren't poisonous. Now, historians debate whether this event actually happened exactly as told, but it's a great story that symbolizes how the tomato's reputation began to change through bold acts and sheer necessity. The real turning point came with the waves of Italian immigrants arriving in America in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In Italy, especially in the poorer southern regions like Naples, people had slowly begun incorporating tomatoes into their cuisine. They were cheap, easy to grow, and packed with flavor. They discovered that cooking tomatoes not only made them delicious, but also helped break down any concerns about toxins, even though the fruit itself was always safe. They created simple, beautiful dishes like pasta al pomodoro and pizza marinara. When these Italian immigrants came to America, they brought their food traditions with them. And Americans, who were initially skeptical, eventually fell in love with Italian food. Pizza and spaghetti with tomato sauce became national obsessions. This, in turn, changed the perception of the tomato back in Europe. If the Americans were eating it and loving it, and it was the base of this delicious new Italian cuisine, then surely it must be safe. It was a complete reversal driven by culture, immigration, and the undeniable power of good food. The journey of the tomato is more than just a funny historical footnote. It's a powerful lesson about how fear and misinformation can shape our lives for centuries. It shows us how cultural biases and class distinctions can even influence what we decide to put on our plates. The wealthy Europeans, with their lead plates and their fear of the foreign, denied themselves a delicious and nutritious food for 200 years, while the poorer classes, who were more open out of necessity, eventually unlocked its potential. It's also a story of how science and observation eventually win out over superstition. Once people actually started testing the tomato instead of just fearing it, they discovered it was not only safe, but also incredibly rich in vitamins like vitamin C and lycopene, an antioxidant that is great for your health. Today, the tomato is one of the most popular fruits in the world. Yes, it's a fruit, botanically speaking. It's the foundation of countless cuisines, from Mexican salsas to Indian curries to the ketchup we put on our fries. It's a symbol of summer, of freshness, and of good health. So, the next time you slice into a tomato, I want you to remember its incredible story. Remember the centuries of fear, the dramatic stunts, and the cultural shifts that had to happen for that simple, juicy fruit to end up on your plate. It's a reminder that sometimes, the things we fear the most are actually the things that can bring us the greatest joy, if we're just brave enough to take a bite.